Okay, cool, Matt. Got it. Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome to the anatomy course from the pop culture classroom. My name is Dion, and I will be your instructor for today. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. For those of you who are going to be following along with pencil and paper, um, one of the things that you need to make sure you do is draw as lightly as possible in the beginning, because we're going to be laying down a lot of construction lines, and you'll want to be able to distinguish between the lines you're just going to erase and the lines you're going to keep. So you're going to want to draw as lightly as possible in the beginning. For those of you who are following along digitally, I'm going to be using a program called Clip Studio Pro. It's very affordable, so if you don't have it, I definitely recommend it. It's one of the best tools for digital comic book making. Plus, it goes on sale very frequently, so if you don't have Photoshop, I definitely recommend Clip Studio Pro. But for those of you who are going to be following along digitally, you can just use layer modes to lighten up your pencil lines. One of the things that we're going to be doing is pretty much every single figure we're going to be drawing today, we're going to be building them inside of a large rectangle. And the reason for that is once this class moves on to further stages, building your characters inside of a rectangle is going to help you be able to draw them from pretty much any angle. So you're going to want to be able to build your characters inside of a rectangle, which will later on be transformed into a 3D cube. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So you're going to first want to switch over to your pencil tool, or if you're using a pencil and paper, you already have your pencil. So first we're going to go ahead and draw a rectangle, which, if you're wondering why my lines are so straight, it's because I am using a specific mode that Clip Studio has that allows you to draw straight lines. If you're using Photoshop, you can just hold down your Shift key. If you're using a pencil and paper, you can either use a ruler, or don't worry about drawing your lines perfectly straight. As long as you're in the ballpark, that's all that really matters. So yeah, first you're just going to go ahead and draw a large rectangle. Next, you're going to go ahead and divide that rectangle in half. And this first division is the most important. So I'm going to go ahead and write halfway mark there so you guys remember it. So the reason that halfway mark is so important is because everything above that halfway mark is all of the head and torso, arms, and everything below that halfway mark is legs and feet. So now that you know that, no matter what pose you're drawing your character in, so long as you make sure that at least half of their body is legs and feet, then your person will look vaguely humanoid. They'll have vaguely humanoid proportions. Alright, so remember that halfway mark. Next, you're going to be dividing it in half again. Now, this halfway division is only so you can make sure that you have things even on either side of your character's body. So you're just going to divide it straight down the center again, like that. And again, don't worry about making it too perfect. Oops, didn't want to show that layer. But yeah, don't worry about making it too perfect, because humans, we're not perfect creatures. We're asymmetrical, you know. On one side of our body, things might be slightly higher than the other. So don't worry about getting these measurements 100% correct, because if you did, your person wouldn't look completely human anyways. Now, it's important to note that the average person is around 7 to 7.5 heads tall, sometimes 8. For drawing purposes, I always just imagine that my character is 8 heads tall. For one, that gives you slightly more heroic proportions. So if you're drawing like comic book characters, it completely fits in. Another reason is because it is much easier to divide this rectangle into 8 even spaces. So you're going to go ahead and divide this upper half in half again by drawing a line straight across. And you're going to do the same on the lower half. Oops, not at an angle. And that's going to get you 4 boxes on either side. Now you're just going to divide those halves in half again, and that's going to get you your 8 heads height. And again, you'll notice, you know, my boxes aren't perfect. They don't have to be, so long as you have roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 divisions, then you're good to go. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to lighten this box up slightly so you guys can see what I'm going to be drawing underneath it. We're going to go ahead and jump into the anatomy. So rather than just drawing a figure, I'm actually going to be drawing what's called a mannequin first. And this is going to be what we're going to be building our anatomy on top of. So, starting with the head, I'm going to zoom in a little here so you guys can see what I'm doing. The head shape is just going to be an oval shape or in an upside down egg shape. I'm not really going to be getting into the specifics of that, since we're focusing more on the general anatomy for this first course. So you're just going to draw a head shape right there. And again, since the average human is about 8 heads tall, that head shape should take up that entire first space there. All right, so once you have that drawn in, we're going to be drawing the torso. And as you can see, it's going to start a little bit lower than the head, just because you have to leave enough space in there for your character's neck. Now we're not going to be using you know, specific rib shapes or anything like that. These are just going to be very basic. So you can imagine their upper torso as being kind of a barrel shape. It could be either a rectangle or an oval. It's totally up to you. I know people kind of switch between the two. But so long as you have a general chest shape there for your upper torso, you'll be good to go. For your shoulders, you're just going to imagine those as being 2 little circles. And if you're wondering about how wide your shoulders should be, the average person is about 3 heads wide. So if you can imagine another head next to the first head you drew on either side, that's going to get you around the shoulder width of an average human. So that's how wide you want your shoulders to be. And you'll notice that I'm not really distinguishing between male or female just yet, because so far everything is the exact same. So you don't have to worry too much about that just yet. Now for your limbs, I always imagine the limbs just as being cylinders. So, you know, a cylinder looks something like that in 3 dimensions. The reason why I imagine them as cylinders is so you can actually imagine them in 3 dimensions. So if you had a cylinder coming towards you, it would look something like that. Nose coming out this direction. And that's going to be important once you start drawing the body in different poses. But since we're just drawing it, you know, straight forwards, then your cylinders is going to look like little rectangles. So your upper bicep is going to go down to about this 3rd line here. So you can see this is the 3rd line. Second, this is the 1st. So I'll go ahead and number all of these just so you can tell what I'm referencing later on. So yeah, you're going to want your biceps to go down to about this 3rd line. Also notice that, you know, this first line, this top line is 0. So you'll do your countdown from there. All right. So your biceps, you know, just 2 little tubes like that. And you can kind of imagine them as being like, you know, your actual skeleton. Obviously this isn't your skeleton, but you will want to learn the different bones inside the human body eventually, just because it will give you a much better idea of the muscles that lie on top of the bones. So yeah, your 2 biceps, we're going to end on that 3rd line there. Now for your actual pelvis, that's actually going to start right on top of this 4th line. And the easiest way I've found to kind of imagine this shape is just being like a little T shape. Like that. And you're going to make it about the same width as the upper torso. Not the shoulders, the upper torso. And this is actually where the first difference between the male and female figure comes into play. But we're going to stick with just the male figure for now. And we're going to jump back to the female figure in just a second. So yeah, that would be your pelvis. If you want to, you can connect these 2 with just another little tube. I usually don't. I just usually leave it open, just because I've drawn this so much that once it gets ingrained into your head, you really don't have to draw it anymore, because you'll just kind of imagine that all this is there. It's actually what an artist named Kim Jung-gi does. Like, he always imagines all of his characters as being inside of a big rectangle like this. Because it allows him to draw them in 3 dimensions from memory. But anyways, back to the figure. So your forearms, they're also going to be tubes, and they're going to go down to the halfway mark. And actually they're going to go down a little bit beneath it, because one thing you'll notice, if you actually look at the average human being, your hand hangs down to about your mid-thigh. Now we're about to see where exactly that mid-thigh lines up right now, because starting at your pelvis, your thigh is going to go down to about the number 6 line, like that. And remember, we're imagining these as kind of being the skeleton of your figure. So your hand is actually going to hang down to your mid-thigh, so right about there. And for now, you can just imagine your hand as being a box. We're going to get into more detail with the hand, but for now, you can just imagine it as being a box. And lastly, well, actually, second to lastly, are going to be your shins, which are going to start on that 6th line as well and go all the way down to the 8th line. You'll notice they're kind of angling in slightly. There we go. Now for your feet. From the front view, you're just going to imagine your feet as if you took a triangle, like so. Split that triangle down the middle, and then you moved those two halves apart. So it'll look something like that. So the feet from the front view is going to look like two little triangles. You can go ahead and draw those in right there. All right. So now we have the mannequin for our figure. And this is what we're going to be laying all of the musculature on top of. Alrighty, so I'm going to get this stuff out of the way. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and copy this over to the other side so I can show you the difference between the male and female anatomy. It's one of the perks of doing this digitally, so you can copy and move stuff around pretty easily. Alright, so focusing on the female anatomy, the major difference that you're going to see with the actual mannequin is going to be the legs. Now for the male, the legs were about as wide as where your armpits would be, so right about there. However, the female legs, you're going to want them to be about as wide as the shoulders, because female hips are slightly wider than male hips. So all you're going to do is make those legs about that wide. So it's going to make them sit at a slightly different angle. But other than that, it's the exact same thing. You're going to go down to about that 6th line. For your thighs, and then your shins are going to start right beneath them. And again, your feet, Just going to look like those two little triangles. Alright, so now we have the male and female mannequins. Uh-oh. Ignore that. As you can see, difference is very slight. Alrighty, so now we're gonna lighten these up as well so we can start doing the musculature on top, starting with the upper torso. Oops. Ignore that. Alrighty. So starting with the upper torso, your arms, well, your shoulders, you're just going to imagine those as being large oval shapes. That's too light, sorry about that. Like so. And actually, we'll go ahead and we'll finish off the male anatomy first and then move on to the female anatomy. So yeah, your shoulders just going to be two little half circles like so. One thing you will want to put on your characters is the clavicle, which kind of dips down like that. You can also go ahead and draw your character's neck in. Now, depending on how muscular your character is, this could either be a rather flattened curve or if your character is really muscular, it looks something a bit more like that. We're not going to make our characters super muscular today. Alrighty. Now about where your character's armpit would be, that's where you're going to want to start your chest muscles. And those are just going to curve down like so. And you're probably going to start noticing a theme on the upper torso. A lot of the muscles, oops, sorry about that. A lot of the muscles are going to be angling towards the center line of your character like so. So your chest muscles angle towards the center line. You'll notice that your ribs underneath kind of start angling towards the center line. For your biceps, from the front view, those even angle towards the center line. So the bottom of your bicep kind of looks like that. Now, another thing that you're going to eventually want to learn to make your muscles look much more realistic is you're going to learn muscle insertions. And that's just which muscles lay on top of which. The best way to figure that stuff out is just go online, check out bodybuilders, check out fitness models and see, where their muscles, connect which muscles lay on top of one another. That's going to get you a very good understanding of which muscles lay on top of which. Now your forearms, you'll notice that they're obviously going to taper towards your wrists, because your wrist is going to be the thinnest part of your arm there. You might be wondering why I left this line here. That's because if you draw a line straight across the body where your elbows would be, right in the center is also about where your belly button is. So that's a really good landmark to remember. Your elbows are going to line up about with your belly button. And again, none of these measurements have to be 100% accurate. Some people's belly buttons are a little higher or lower, but in general, you're going to find it about right there. So it's a good landmark. Oops. Ignore that. Now your lats, you're only going to be able to see slightly from the front view. Your lats are those big back muscles that kind of give your character that, that power V shape. If you're drawing like a superheroic character, your lats are what give your character that really distinguishable power V shape. But you're not going to be able to see them very clearly if your character's arms are down to their sides like this, unless they're like really buff. But again, we're going to be going with a more average build. Now you're also going to have, I can't remember what these muscles are called, but these are also going to angle in slightly, like so, right above your hips. And actually, preemptively, we're just going to go ahead and draw a little bathing suit on our character. So we're in compliance with YouTube's TOS. Then we're going to move on to the hips. Now, even on male hips, they are going to flare out slightly before they angle back into your legs. Now, if you can imagine, there's a muscle on the outside of your leg, and there's also a muscle on the inside. This muscle on the inside, you'll actually want it to be a little bit longer than the outside, and that'll give your character much more realistic legs. If you're drawing the actual muscles, it's because there's this big muscle that goes all the way up here. On both sides. So that's just an artist's way of kind of depicting that muscle. Another thing you guys are going to want to do is eventually, for all of these muscles, you're going to develop your own kind of shorthand. And that's only going to come with practice. So the more that you actually draw these things, the easier that they're going to come to you. And this little, muscle thing here is just one of those shorthand tricks that I've learned drawing people a lot. Now your calves, also going to angle in like so. Now your, can't remember what that bone is called. Is it the fibia, the tibia? I don't remember. Either way, this ankle bone on the inside here is going to be slightly higher than the ankle bone on the outside. So while you know, most of everything up here was kind of following this kind of angle. Your ankles, the exact opposite. They follow an angle like that. So that's something to remember. We're actually going to leave the feet as little triangles for now, because if you'll notice, I saved. Let's go ahead and draw the bottom of his trunks here. But if you notice, I saved the feet and hands for last. Now the reason I did that is because I have a really easy way of showing how to draw the hands and feet. For hands, it's called a box of hot dogs. I did not invent box of hot dogs. I actually think it was a Twitch streamer called Ink One, or maybe it was Sticky. I can't remember which one of them. But the reason it's called box of hot dogs is because it's really easy for you to remember. And once I show you how to do it, it's probably going to get stuck in your head forever. So we'll get to box of hot dogs in just a second. One of the last things I wanted to do was just to show you how the abs would line up on this torso. So depending on like how ripped you wanted your character to be, the abs are going to start just a little bit below your chest muscles here. And if you notice, they kind of line up with your ribs on the side there. So that's kind of an easy way of drawing the abs, if you can just imagine them as lining up with your ribs there. So something like that. Again, you're going to want to check out like fitness models or bodybuilders to get the exact details down. For your shoulders, one thing you will eventually notice is that your shoulder muscles actually lay on top of the chest muscles at the tops here. But that's only going to be, you know, apparent if you're drawing like a really muscular person. All right. So your hands, box of hot dogs. Now I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna hide this stuff really quickly, and we're gonna do the hands on a different layer, just so there's no confusion. All right, so box of hot dogs. First thing you're gonna do is you're just gonna draw a box. Like so. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to start drawing your hot dogs. Now we're going to start on this end here. Stop that. And our first hot dog is going to be about the same height as our box here. So you're going to want your first hot dog to be about that same height. And it's going to go all the way on one end of your box. Like so. A little hot dog. Alright, your next hot dog is going to go all the way over on this other end. You're going to want it to be a little bit shorter than the first hot dog, like around there. And the reason you want this hot dog to be shorter is because it's your pinky. So that hot dog represents your pinky. So now you should have a shape that kind of looks like it's throwing up metal hands. Oh no. Oh no, the website just went down. I think we may be having some technical difficulties. I think the 2.7 web server just went down. But just in case, I'm just going to go ahead and keep going. Because we'll probably be able to make this, you know, a video on demand anyways. But yeah, so you have your first 2 hot dogs. One sec, I think I just got a message. Okay, so the 2.7 website just went down. But yeah, I'm just going to keep going for the video on demand. Alrighty. So after your first 2 hot dogs, you're going to go ahead and start adding in your next 2 hot dogs, which you're going to want to be evenly spaced in between these 2. So your first hot dog, well, sorry, your third hot dog, is going to go right next to this one, but it's going to be a bit longer because that hot dog represents your middle finger, just leaving one more hot dog up top here, which is going to be about the same height as the first hot dog you drew. So it's going to go right about there. Again, because you want it to be evenly spaced. Now you might be thinking, that doesn't look much like a hand, but that's okay. Because again, just like with the mannequins we drew, those things there, this is just the construction lines for your hand. So once you actually start adding the meat and the potatoes on there, it'll look more like a hand. You also might be noticing there's a thumb missing, which is okay because that is actually your last hot dog. And that's going to go on the same end that you started your first hot dog on, starting at the bottom here. And you're going to want it to be about the same height as your box, kind of sticking off to the side here. Just like that. And that is your last hot dog. So now we can go ahead and start adding the details on. And actually, I drew my hot dog a little wide, so I'm just going to use some digital tricks and make it a little skinnier. There we go. And I did that just by using the transform tool, which you can just hit Control T and it'll get you the transform tool, which is the exact same in Clip Studio and Photoshop. So if you guys are users of Photoshop, you'll be able to learn Clip Studio pretty quickly. Alright. So now that we have the meat and potatoes for our hand, I'm going to go ahead and draw the details on top. First things first, you're going to want your hand to look like it can bend and move. So that will entail drawing the finger joints. Now the finger joints, it's going to be super easy. You're just going to take each of your fingers and divide them in half. So the halfway point is going to be about there. Halfway point for this one's going to be about there. Actually, this one's a little lower. Halfway point's going to be about there. Halfway point's going to be about there. And that's going to get you your first finger joints. Also here, halfway point is going to be about there. Now for the second finger joint, you're just going to take this space here and divide it in half again. So halfway point is going to be about there. Halfway point is going to be about there. Halfway point is going to be about there. And halfway point is going to be about there. And that's going to get you your actual finger and thumb divisions. Now adding one more thing for your thumb is starting at about this halfway point. You're going to do kind of a half circle that goes about to the midway point on your hand or your box. And that's going to represent your thumb muscle. On the opposite side, you can kind of continue this pinky line down at a slight angle, and that'll get you the muscle for the other side of your hand. So when we actually draw on the details, it'll start looking much more hand-like. Now, one thing you'll notice I'm doing is I'm bulking this up a lot. And that's because your hand, while the bones start about where we drew these division lines, so that's about where your finger bones would start, you'll notice that the webbing on your hands starts a little bit higher, like right around there. Another thing I've noticed that makes your fingers look a bit more finger-like is this halfway mark on your fingers, this joint here. If you make it slightly wider than the tip of your finger, it'll make your fingers look much more finger-like. Like so. I'm kind of rushing it slightly, but you should get the gist. Oh, another thing, for the webbing, you see how your fingers kind of follow this slight curve like this? The webbing does the same. So for the pinky here, I'd be bringing it down slightly. And for this section here, I'd be bringing it down slightly. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Box of hot dogs. If this is the palm of your hand, you can go ahead and draw a line like that. You know, a couple more lines like that, and it'll, you know, look like your palm. Whereas if it's the back of your hand, go ahead and draw your little knuckles there. And fingernails up top here. And obviously your fingernails only take up that little tip portion of your finger. So it looks something like that. Alright. And that is how you turn box of hot dogs into a hand. Now, getting back to the actual physical anatomy. One thing that we're going to go ahead and jump into is the female anatomy while we have the time. So it's going to be pretty much the exact same thing that we did for the male. Yeah, you notice shoulders still about 3 heads apart, 3 heads of width. That's something that's the same for both men and women. Again, the biceps. Still going to follow that little angle like so. And I'm going to make this build a little bit more slight. And the forearms. I'm going to angle out like that. Now you might notice I angled them out slightly more than on the male. And that is because you want to leave some space to account for those wider hips, right? Now you're going to do the same thing with the clavicle up here. It's just going to dip down slightly like so. You can go ahead and draw your neck in there. And again, unless you're Your female figure is going to be super muscly. Then you don't have to worry about making, the muscles up top here super tall. I think they're called your trapezius, your traps. But again, I'm not, a doctor or anything, so I don't know all of the names of these muscles. But you don't have to know the names of them to draw them, so if you don't know the actual names, don't worry too much about it. Now for the female, I'm going to go ahead and draw, some straps here because they're also wearing a bathing suit. Alright, so for the female chest, the easiest way that I found to draw this shape is if you imagine right at the top here, a little heart shape, an upside down heart shape. Actually, yeah, little upside down heart shape. That is the easiest way to draw the female chest. Now, one thing I've noticed like some artists do is, if they're wearing like a t-shirt or something, they'll have like little curves that go up like that. Don't do that. Cloth would stretch straight across like that. The only time you'd see those little curves in there is if they were wearing body paint. So unless your characters are running around in body paint, don't do that. Even latex would look like that. All right. So again, at about this 3 line, that's where your belly button would be. And from that point on, the torso is going to flare out to accommodate those wider hips. Like so. And other than that, everything else is going to be pretty much the same. Again, that interior thigh muscle is going to go down a little bit lower than line number 6 on the inside. And have something that looks a little more like that. And I know we haven't done the feet yet, but we're going to get to that in just a second. Alrighty. Bathing suit bottom. Alright. Now one thing you'll notice for the female, again, the hips are a bit wider. But overall, not by much. So the hand from the side view. Now, still thinking about that whole box of hot dogs method. So, if you turn that box to the side, it would look a little more like this. And again, since the fingers are about or the hot dogs are about as long as the box, your hot dog is going to be somewhere around there. But your thumb hot dog Just waiting for my pen to catch up. Alright, so your thumb hot dog, again, is going to be about as tall as your box, so it's going to hang down to about right there. So that's what you're going to want your hands to look like from the side view there. And again, they hang down to about your mid-thigh. So right about there. And that's something that's going to be the same for male and female. Now again, none of these measurements have to be 100% the same for every single character you make. You know, some people's hands or arms are slightly longer than others. If any of you guys watch, you know, like UFC or any sort of combat sports, you'll often hear them talking about, you know, their reach, the people's reach. And those different numbers, that just shows you that, you know, different people have different lengths arm-wise, even if they're the same height. Alrighty, so lastly, we're going to go over the feet really quickly. Now, I don't have a really cool name for how to draw the feet, unfortunately, but the method I have to draw them is still pretty easy. Alright, so going back to box of hot dogs here, your foot is just going to start with that little triangle. So if you remember, we started the feet off, you know, if you took a triangle, split it down the middle, and then separated those two triangles. So you're just going to have one of those little triangles here. So let's say we're just doing the left foot. Alright, so this is going to be your left foot. Now starting at this interior side, that's going to be where you start your big toe off. And that's just going to be a little oval at the bottom there. Now all the toes that you draw next to this big toe are going to be these little double humped curlicue kind of shapes that are slowly going to get smaller. So all of those curlicue shapes are going to fit in this space here. Now the reason I draw these two things separately is just another kind of form of shorthand that I've learned drawing anatomy a bunch. So you're just going to take your first little curlicue shape and draw it right next to your big toe right there. And then you're going to slowly add more of those curlicue shapes that represent your toes right next to the first. And you'll notice that they're slowly getting smaller until your pinky toe, the last one there, is going to be the smallest of the bunch. Now, if you remember, the outside ankle is a little lower than the inside ankle. So you're going to put a little bump there for your inside ankle and kind of go down at the ankle there, and that's going to be your outside ankle, which means that your shin will go up from there. Alright, so again, those are the construction lines. Final lines are going to look something like this. Now the first thing you're going to notice is that your big toenail is kind of like a little jelly bean kind of shape, or a half moon. And you're going to want to imagine that is sitting at a slightly different angle than your other toenails. Like your big toenail, it's facing up towards the sky. All your other toenails, they're going to be pointing more towards you. So it's going to be at a slightly different angle. like so. And once you have all your toenails drawn on, you go ahead and draw the rest of the foot in there. And that's pretty much it. You can call it cone of curly cues. I don't know. Ta-da! That's pretty much it. Alright. So now going back to the actual figures. If you want, you could go ahead and draw the toes in there. But since we only have about 3 minutes left, I'll go ahead and briefly talk about some resources that you guys can check out if you want to further your knowledge with anatomy. The first guy that I suggest you check out is a guy named Proco. And Proco has a YouTube channel that I would definitely suggest you guys check out. He's a master of anatomy. He uses what's called the Loomis method. It's pretty much the same thing that I kind of just showed you guys, but Proco is an anatomy master. So you're going to want to check out Proco on YouTube. Another person you're going to want to check out, actually let's just go ahead and get all the YouTube folks out of the way. You're also going to want to check out Psychra. Also does a lot of anatomy work. Let's see. Oh, there was one more. I can never. Oh, Modern Day James. Now, one of the things you'll notice with Modern Day James is he's going to be showing you guys how to draw, anatomy in perspective. So if this was our little rectangle, he's going to show you how to build a body inside of this little rectangle so that your characters will look like they're in perspective. Something like that. I know that's terrible, but Modern Day James is going to show you what that's supposed to look like. Yeah, so you're going to want to make sure you check out those 3 people on YouTube. They'll give you a lot more information as far as drawing anatomy than I'm able to in this short amount of time. Books. Andrew Loomis. I definitely recommend Andrew Loomis. He has a very intuitive way of showing you how to learn anatomy. You might also want to pick up Force, The Art of Animation. And you might also want to pick up Framed Ink. Because it's also going to show you how to draw figures in perspective. But I think that'll just about do it for our class today. Once again, my name has been Dion Harris. I am an instructor for the Pop Culture Classroom and a professional illustrator. And I hope you guys enjoyed our class today. If you did, make sure you leave us a comment make sure you check out our other courses that we're going to be having for the Pop Culture Classroom to keep you guys occupied during these very, very strange times. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you again for the next class. All right, take care. That didn't end the stream. Oh, there we go.